Welcome to this episode of Kaleidoscope, the podcast all about change and transformation. I'm your host, Valerie Crozier-Nicol, and my guest today is Sally Drury. Sally and I met again through Becoming 360. I'm trying to remember the name of the Soul Tribe. And I was I want to say guinea pig, practice client. Is that a better word? Practice
Yeah,
client
guinea pig.
for money chakra alignment. Was that
Alchemy, we're calling it at the moment. It's
alchemy?
sort of
Alchemy.
a new a new process that Joe Cantel's developed.
Brilliant. So that's how we met, and we thought,
Mm.
well, why not? Because you host a podcast and I host a podcast, so it would be mutually beneficial to be on each other's podcasts. So Sally, I've briefed you before this through we email. The four questions are: what was life like before the change? What was life like during the change? What was life like after the change? And what can you see for the future? Now, not that any of us have a crystal ball, but we kind of know what we'd like to see happen. So I'm going to pass it over to you to answer those four questions, and then I'll come back at the end maybe with some questions and follow-ups.
Yeah, hopefully you'll prompt me as well because I'm like, oh, my perimenopausal brain's like off on one. But thank you for inviting me, and gives me an opportunity to talk, which I can do plenty of. But yeah, so before the change, the transformation, I think the change before the change, of going into coaching, I've always been a trainer. I've worked in training for the past 22 years. So I've been in that lifestyle where it's quite hustle and bustle and always worked with adults in various different roles. So I worked as a trainer in a corporate environment to start with. I got poached, which was lovely, to go and work for a training company. And then I went back to the corporate place. They had me back and I went back as another trainer. So, I was like, and this is only in my early 20s. Um, and I just loved training people. So at the same time, I was going to college and I had my little boy as well. So I like to somehow create create a hustle and bustle environment for myself. That was what I thought was just me. So I would do anything and everything, work full time, manage a family, and I'll just go to college on a night as well. Do you know, that's just what you do, isn't it? And I was a bit of as well, now looking back, trying to prove something. I should have done this college journey before my early 20s, had a child young. So I was like on this mission, unknown mission, to prove my worth by being the busy person. So I would do a full-time job, have my child, and then go to college on an evening. And that was the first part of this. And it developed from there. I had my second child when I was 25, so still young, second child, and going back into the workplace actually didn't become as smooth as I would have liked. When people say about things that they experience, I was a trainer doing very well at that time. I'd done lots of things, gone off and done projects, but having a child, this my second child particularly, meant that I couldn't, in their eyes, come back and do the same job on a part-time position. So they sort of sidelined me and demotivated me, stripped me of my training title as such, but all under the regulations at that time because they was paying me the same salary. So that was okay. Not in my mind. Not when you've worked for that, gone off, come back, and I'm like, and it sounds really stupid, but I was in a role where they sat me back with teams that I'd trained. So I felt really like conflicted of like very much, well, all I've done is gone off and had another child, come back and been totally penalised. I took it a bit further, but the fight in me had gone, I thought, and I very much sometimes, unbeknown to myself at the time, but I'm very much something else must be going on. And funnily enough, um, I at the time never knew about law of attraction, but when I look back, there's loads of things that happened. And I was when I was at home part time, I watched this program about this florist, And it just sounded fantastic. Never ever thought about a florist in my life. Watched this program. Then that evening, I had a dream because this is so vivid to me. It's so like vivid. I had a dream that I owned a florist off the back of this, and I thought that's really strange. But that sort of dream, it felt so real. The following day, bizarrely enough, a leaflet came through the door for part-time for a once a week flower arranging course. And I did it. I went and did the flower arranging course. I followed those breadcrumbs. And but me and my brain, um, I was like, I did the part-time course, and all this was going on with work as well, where they'd put me in, demotivated me, everything. So I just decided that I was going to leave. I wasn't having that. I wasn't having that situation. I left my job, and this was sort of my daughter was born in the September. I went back to work and must have gone back to work about the April time, something like that. And I started this flower arranging course. I quit my job and started and did a degree course for the September. So two children in couture, and I went off and did a floristry art and design degree off the back of this premise that I'd seen myself in a shop, and that's what I was going to do. Um, with the view that I was going to train it. So for 3 years, I did my degree. In my last year, I also started my PGCE as well, which people said to me in the college, we don't normally get people that do the last year of the degree and start a PGCE. And I was like, yeah, but you haven't met me. So I did a degree and my PGCSE part-time in the final year, plus two children. By the way, my daughter was only like one and a bit by this point as I started the degree. And I always had this vision that I would have a shop. And it was almost like there was a timeline for me. And God knows why, because the the degree, I could have done my PGCE after I'd done my degree, but for some reason I did it at the same time. And I passed, and I passed both of them really well. I got a 2-1, and I passed my PGCE. I had one more year to do, and I passed them. But as soon as I passed my degree, started running my own stall for floristry. And within a year later, I had a shop. So that vision of the shop just didn't go. Um, but I was training all the time, so I always had this vision that I was training, and I did that. But what I realized over time was I like to be so busy. For some reason, that was me. I took on a job at the local council as a flower arranging teacher. So the course that I'd done 4 years earlier that had got me where I was, I was then the teacher. I went back and I was the teacher. That teacher had left. So do you know when you think, God, this is so bizarre that this all happened. Now I'm teaching it here. Um, and I went on the journey of teaching that. Then I went off and taught maths and English. I worked with adults with learning difficulties. It parachuted me off. But I was also running a shop. So can you see this busy person? This busy person. Um, and I loved it. And it's funny because somebody else said to me, "Oh, but it's not stress if I love it." I loved it, but my God, was I was I stressed. Um, and I did that. So I started my shop in Floristry Journey when I finished my degree, 2009. I came out of it burnt out in 2015 and went just full time into teaching. And the burnout moment, I didn't even label it as burnout. I knew something wasn't right. I was doing it, but I wasn't enjoying it. I was stressed with it. If I only knew what I knew now after running a business for that length of time, I was at a point where I was managing, coping, using other mechanisms to try and get by. Food, I put loads of weight on. I'd have a good blowout once a month on a weekend and then die for days later. You know, I'd be out partying and then I'd die. Just all things like that, just to try and get through it. And everybody used to say, "Oh, isn't it a lovely job having a flower shop? It's lovely." And it's like, it is, but it's so stressful. I was doing 30 weddings a year, and I was panicking that every wedding I was doing was okay. I was so on the edge of it. Um, and the pinnacle bit was I had a very close bereavement. I couldn't cope with the bereavement, and the stress. And because I had a creative role, I was teaching it, I was making stuff, the creativity in me just went, couldn't create, couldn't think about creating. So I had to shut it all down. And so I went in my cave, and that's how I describe it now. I hid in my cave. I went and just taught full time for the council. I worked with, and don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it to a point. I worked with adults that were facing lots of vulnerability. So I gained loads and loads of experience. But actually, I sort of went in my cave, but then I still kept that busy person mentality going. It can't leave me. It's like my comfort zone. It, so I then became a troubleshooter in there. I'd go into different departments or areas and sort it out. Someone then needed to be able to people to teach it maths and English. So off I would go from Hull to Wakefield and train to be a English teacher as well as a full-time job and a family. Then I went and did my master's with a full-time job and a family. So that busy person just could not leave me. Um, and also that justification. I need to have that person. I need to show that I can do it. I need to, and I only know that now looking back. Didn't, I knew it at the time a bit, but I didn't really. I was on this roller coaster. I had to be a busy person, and then that became my identity, the busy person. Can do all sorts, juggle all sorts of things. Brilliant. Until it's not going right, and I hit another wall. Because you'll go in a cycle and then you'll hit the wall, and it's only the wall that'll stop you. And the wall came, so I'd gone from, and it's usually cycles. I say it's life always a cycle. So I'd done a good 5 years on that roller coaster cycle, got to 2015, then started another cycle for another about 4 years of being the busy person, troubleshooting, doing everything. When it got to 2019, and what there was things that happened in 2019, which was quite significant. My dad was really ill, but the beginning of 2019, it was all blowing off. Where I was working, people were leaving. I had more and more responsibility. It was quite toxic, and I fell, slid on black ice, and broke my wrist. So that meant I couldn't drive. But no, somebody picked me up, still took me to work, and I sat there with a pot and typed with one hand. Did everything with one hand. I actually experienced bullying at that point as well from a higher manager. So not only was I going back to work when I could have been off sick, I then went down a rabbit hole of experiencing bullying and being told I was a bully, which was very bizarre for me, really bizarre. And I couldn't understand. I was like, well, I've come back to work even when I could be off. Well, really, I should have just took that time off, but I didn't. Gone back to work, experienced that. And that was the point where something in me was like, right, I always said if I become the person that constantly moans about the situation they're in, then that's the point I've got to change. So after 10 years of working in the council, I dropped down to part-time and started to build up my own portfolio of people, businesses to move out. So again, busy person, doing all that. I had to have that safety net of knowing that I could go in a smoother transition. So I did that and I fully left. And what was the bizarrest thing? And people might watch this and think, can't believe it or they can believe it. After 10 years service and experiencing the bullying, um, which I did take further and nothing got resolved. And I even was upset. I went to occupational health. I've never even experienced that in 10 years. 10 years. I officially left in December 2019, and no one even really knew I'd left after doing all sorts. No one really did anything. I didn't do anything after 10 years service. So it was a bit of a sticking point, really, that I'd sort of gone the way that I had. Um, but 2020 started, yeah, raring to go. And we all know what's happened in 2020. Um, so bizarrely enough, I'd given a contact with somebody that I was working with. I was trying to do work online, just couldn't suit me at that time. I probably was still in recovery now looking back from the previous year that I'd had. I'd also had a really bad, at the end of 2019, my dad was really, really ill with cancer. So that took a hell of a lot of work for him, for us. Um, he's still okay now though. But that his chemotherapy finished in February and then we went into lockdown. So lockdown meant a lot of things to a lot of people, but for me, actually, it meant that I had to, what am I going to do? And there was a real bitterness. And I'll have to be really honest, there was a real bitterness because I fell into that category once again. I'm not the lucky person. I fell into the category of not being able to claim anything because I'd gone self-employed after Rishi's date. And I was bitter because I'd just spent 10 years working for somebody. 5 years of that, during that time, I'd ran my own business. And I couldn't claim AB, you know? So it was really, really like, oh God. But equally, it was calming because everybody was not doing anything and people didn't want to know. So there was something calming about the situation, but still needed some income coming in and stuff like that. My husband got furlough, but I didn't get a blooming bean. So I felt this real mission, which was still a bit of the part of me that can't stop. And I ended up working on the COVID testing centre. So I did a 5 months stint on there, and that was really good. Very interesting, eye-opening. Um, and then one of the contacts that I'd been working with before COVID on my own, this guy's business, he said, I'll just take you on as a employee. Um, because then if anything happens, you've covered. And I was like, oh yes, safety net again. Yes, safety net. I'll have the safety net. And I fell into the safety net. So 2020, I fell into the safety net and worked for somebody else again. And I was there as a business development. Um, and I got him lots of business and I got him lots of funding. And I was like, it was eating me away because, and I didn't, I was like, at first, like, oh, yeah, it's a safety net, it's a safety net. 2022 come about, and I was like, this is something in me. And stress comes out, but I didn't know the time that what stress was coming out in my physical aspect. And it had done for that past 10 years. I get really sore eyes. I've got eczema. My eczema gets really bad. I have really bad flare up skin wise. I have this flushing, my face, all sorts happens. And then I started to realize and see the pattern. But it took me from 2022 to 2024 to really take that leap. But what happened in the middle of that is I knew that something was brewing and I started to look down avenues. And in 2023, well, 2022, 23, part of the project I was working on was to I was working with women and had this real desire that I needed to do some networking meetings for women that are just to sort of meet other people to chat about inspirational stories. So I started doing that. And somebody in that group gave me a name of somebody else that I should go and look at because they do vision boards. This person, so do you know when you think, now I know how, spatter breadcrumbs. So they said, go and get in touch with Lisa McMurtry. So I was like, oh, okay. So um, I got in touch with Lisa and I'd been searching around looking, do I go into again, getting the degrees? I was like, do I go into educational psychology? Do I go into counselling? Because I had a real desire from a project that my path maybe was leading me that way. Um, I've got a real good mindset. I've got a real good mindset, you know. I have got a good mindset, but I wasn't dealing with stress. So I contacted Lisa, and then Lisa was like, I've got a coaching course starting. So then we had a meeting, and then bizarrely enough, she was from Hull, lived around the corner from me, the same age as me, and the person that had given me her name now lives in Lisa's house around the corner from me. Do you know, and you're like, this is absolutely bizarre. And I think it was that conversation was in the February, and in the March 2023, I started doing coaching. I joined up, signed up. It was scary. It felt like a lot of money, but something told me that this was what was gonna protect me off. And it's been the biggest transformation ever because I started to realize how much with the stress I was in, how I can change that, how I can help others. I was already doing a lot of that work of helping others, but the bit I'd missed was I wasn't helping myself. And now when I look back, I think, God, if I'd only had some of the tools now, back when I had my shop, when I had all that going on, it maybe I could have managed it differently. But fate was obviously fate. My destiny was that that was what I was going to go through. Um, and it makes me a better coach now for what I went through as well. I also had that time I had a very close bereavement, illness. My parents split up, which is really difficult when you're an adult. That's like the hardest thing. Still plowing on like an absolute Trojan. Um, so now I've learned lots and lots of different things, lots of mindset. I've done lots and lots of work on myself to reach that point. But it's not a point because we carry on. We carry on and carry on. Um, but wow, do you know the difference? And now I can see it, and how I can now see it to be able to support other people is fantastic. And when I say to people, I know what it's like, don't have to know what everything's like because as a coach you do, but I really do. Um, you know, and it's been fantastic. The change physically. So we always go on about the mental change. Um, my skin clears up. I still have some flares, and I can recognize when it is. Um, my skin has cleared up. Um, I don't have some of the same symptoms. Um, I don't have the headaches. I don't have any of that stress feeling that I was thriving off. And when I know when people go, and I've heard it, and people say to me, "Oh, but I love my job. I love training for the 20 years I've been doing it and running a shop, and I'd love to have done that for longer." But it was absolutely killing me inside. And just because I loved it, doesn't mean that I'm not in a stress mode. Um, you know, couldn't deal with anything that else that came along. I couldn't deal with it properly. So when now I've got gorgeous tools, it's not always perfect. There are things that crop up and you're like, oh God, but I'm not camping there for years. I'm there for a bit of time. And it's usually like something's throwing me where I'm like having to, recently a lot of stuff, sort of revelations of like, oh yeah, that's why I do that, or that's where that's come from. And that up levelment throws some backlash at us, and we're like, oh, you know, it's what's going on here. That's the point. Usually you stop, but you've got to carry on. So, and with sort of people going into hospital and things like that and juggling stuff and just general life gets in the way. It's just carrying on, but knowing you've got those tools now to help you and not to stop and wait for the struggle. Um, so yeah, and I was the girl when I started in 2023 with a group of ladies going, oh my God, they're really woohoo, and I'm not woohoo. Um, I can't meditate, I can't switch off. And but over time, I've managed to do it over time. I've seen the benefit, and I'm a researcher. So I always say to people, I'm a bit of a research geek. Say, I've gone into a training and people have used words and language, and I've gone off and researched them more and gone, oh wow, do you know, that's what that is, or that's the science behind it. Because I'm a bit of a fact person. I'm like, oh, there is science. It's not woo-woo. There is like absolute gold dust science here, and we're not sharing it. So yeah, everybody, and I always say, I've done a bit of research on this, and it might be worth a punt. Do you know what I mean? It'd be worth like, so yeah. And I realized how much. I say when we was doing about law of attraction, and I was like, oh my word, I think I've been doing that for however long. Do you know, I had a vision, I had a dream, I was going to own a shop, and all the breadcrumbs just kept coming. The bit that we missed was how I was going to manage myself. Somebody didn't tell me that bit. They didn't give me that bit. Or maybe they did, and I want there ready and open to listen to it and do it. Um, so now I've come to this space with a wealth of experience to help others. Um, and I'll continue to work on myself. Have I answered all your
And
questions?
thank you. Well, the one would be, what does the future hold?
What was the future hold? So, um, I've been doing mindset coaching for the past 2 years, maybe now, 1.5 years. And I've gone on a journey where I've needed to earn that space myself. So I've now got a bit of a more, I didn't know what that looked like when I left, when I was went out on my own and I was like itching and I was like, oh, and I felt a bit nervous about what I was doing. But now it means that I will be coaching, doing transformational coaching. Um, it means that I will be creating a business that supports others. I'm really focused on getting into the workplace and doing workshops on stress and burnout and overwhelm. There is lots out there that gives you the overview, but I want to come with well, this is what it feels like, this is what it looks like, this is how you can manage it. Because I think when we do these mental health, and don't get me wrong, they've got a place, I've done them, we almost distance ourselves with like, oh, this is the facts, or this is what stress looks like, this is what a mental health breakdown looks like, this is what PTSD looks like. And as a participant, you sit there and go, yeah, yeah, no, I'm not like that. I'm not as bad as that. I'm not as bad as that. I'm not as bad as that. And I think someone just coming in and asking a few questions and pointing out from a real life terms. And it's not to say you're stressed and you can't do anything. It's just to say, right, might be how you're feeling. And before you get to this burnout point or this point of overwhelm, have you thought of doing this? Do you know? And working with it. I call it the veg and mash solution. Do you know when you had the veg under the mash for the kids? I'm coming with meditation and EFT tapping and all sorts of lovely modalities, but you might not know you're going to do it initially. Because if you did, you'd be like, oh, that's not me. Oh, that's not going to work for me until you do it. And that was me. 2023. Oh, they're all woohoo. That's not going to work for me. I'm a busy person. Do you know? So yeah, so building a business that brings holistic practices to real life situations in the workplace and people in a I always feel myself as a bit of a translator. So
Yeah,
yeah.
brilliant. Have you ever read Why Woo Woo Works?
I think that might have been on one of the books that somebody told me, and I don't know if I've read that one. I have read loads of books, by the way, because you did put on
You
it.
would
What?
no, you'd know if you'd read that one because
I don't think
it's
I've
one of
read that
those.
one.
If you're a researcher and it's this thing about explaining stuff to people.
Mm.
Um, it's kind of all in there. It's a bit of a gift.
Oh,
If
I'll
you have skeptics, you can kind of go, well, in this book and the research says, and this is why this works and all the rest. So it is a real gift when you have those. Are they blue personalities that I want to know why this works. I want to know who says it works. I want to know who's done the research on it. Those people think they're blue personalities. Um, why Woo Woo Works is one of my go-to books for that. Because
oh,
by the sounds of things, although you're working with businesses, what you and I are doing is kind of the same because I'm going in and I'm teaching, but I'm very much always telling my story and
yeah.
relating it to, you know, the toast falling, jam side down, and then you go to one of the drive-throughs and they're out of croissants, even though it's only 8:30 in the morning, and that just layers on and layers on and layers on until you get to the point where you snap at your family when you get home at night and then go, I didn't mean to do that. How did that happen again? So it's very much making it real and going, and this is what we can do in the moment. Um,
Yeah. I always
you
used to
talked,
say, Val, I'm not lucky. That was my mantra. I didn't realize it was my mantra. I'm never lucky, never lucky, never lucky, never get anything. Well, no, I didn't. Do you know what I mean? I have to
yeah.
work for everything. Don't get anything, mate. I have to work for it. Wow. Don't say that anymore. Do you know?
Um, we actually did about the COVID grants, but I was exactly like you because I only started my business in
Yeah.
September 2018, which was after Rishi's date. So I didn't get any. I think I got the third and fourth round of grants, but not the first and the second. So
Yeah. Probably.
like
Yeah.
you, I lost my business overnight. Um,
Yeah.
so your busy person identity, did you get to the bottom of where that came from and have you put it to bed?
So the busy person identity um is about proving myself.
Yeah.
Because I didn't follow the path that I thought I would have done when I was younger, or people thought I would have done. I constantly had to prove myself. So by proving myself means I can do loads of things. I can be your best juggler, give a busy person more jobs.
Absolutely.
Um, but I also have a ceiling on that. So the ceiling on that was that um, I never seemed to get beyond a certain point of in the sort of job roles. Do you know? So
Yeah.
there's um, being good enough
Hmm. That's exactly.
was one of them that Kate has come up. Another one that's come up very recently, which first time I'm probably sharing this, is not belonging.
Mm.
So when I sit in each identity, the busy person identity, or um, I was a young mum, young working mum, so I never, um, even though it was the 2000s, it was the millennium, it didn't sit with my close friends. It didn't sit, so my close friends were in that zone. Nobody I met was like that, do you know? So I always felt this, and I could probably trace it back a lot younger, but that not belonging or where do I belong? Um, and then it sort of exaggerated a little bit more as I went into coaching. I didn't see it at the time. It's only recently that I've seen it, but it's maybe taken me a year to work out where I belong. I don't belong anywhere, but let's just belong with me. Do you know?
Well done.
I am the
Very
belonging.
good.
Um, but even when I started the coaching and I was like, oh, this is woohoo, oh, this isn't me, oh, I can't do that. Oh, and we even touched on it. From Hull, I have a broad accent. And from East Hull, I picked out that as a category to put myself in. Um, because well, they're more woohoo than me. I can't do meditation. Oh. So I totally felt I had to camp in somebody else's camp.
Yeah.
And now I've realized it's taken this recently, which was doing the practice that I just did with you. Another practice is the chakra work and the energy and the EFT and everything like that. That came out.
Yeah.
And it
And
was
I think
big.
that's part of the thing when you're a coach, when you're a facilitator, when you're a trainer, you kind of don't belong. You're going into teams, you're going into women's groups, and as much fun as you have with them, and as much as you build relationships, you're there for 6 weeks and then you're away again. It's very
Yeah.
rare that you don't really belong. You're going in, you're delivering your stuff, and you're coming away again. Same with the coaching. You're meeting whoever it is for, I don't know how long your mine are,
Mm,
8 to 12 weeks. Um, 6 weeks for the hypnotherapy for PTSD.
yeah.
And you can get really close to people in that time, but then that's it over and they're away
But
on
they
to,
leave me. Yeah, yeah. I've had really good relationships with, I'm very good at building relationships. I have no problem communicating. So that feeling was like, oh, why's that? But they all go. Working relationships, people have gone, students have gone, just like you said. And it's like that's built on that identity of not belonging, as if,
yeah.
you know,
And
and then
that
other things I'm
and
doing, that's some like, oh, I don't belong now with those people. Look, I don't need to,
you know,
you know.
well, we do. I would
We
contradict
do,
that a bit because
but
we
not
are
like in the
we are
sense.
meant to live in um families,
Yes.
tribes, whatever, depending on how far back in history you want to go. You lived in a tribal support, and you maybe lived way back then in a village of about 100, was about the size of a like a Neanderthal type village, was about
Yeah.
100 people, and you did have to have a head of the village and so on and so forth. And when those people, even in our now, this part of the brain, that limbic system and that basal bit has never had an upgrade. So when those people who are our main caregivers, as we would call them, but then they would be the head of our tribe. So like your daddy becoming ill, that completely rocks your foundation. It completely takes the rug. And I'm very, very thankful that he's well
Mm,
now. Um, but you also had a death of someone close. That can completely rock your world depending on who it is, where it is, what's the nature of. If it's somebody who has got to a great age and you have lots of lovely memories, there's still a lot of grief, but it's the natural course of things.
mm.
But if it's the head of the tribe and they're young, that can completely floor
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
because of
Well, at
this
this
basal tribal type.
that thing, yeah. Well, what happened at that point as well is my mum left the city. She left where she lives with me and moved to another city. So, so that all happened.
Yeah. And
Um,
when we don't know those things, when we don't know, we just think, oh, I can't cope. I'm weak. I'm not. Everybody else, my friends have gone, their parents have gone through divorce. Why am I, or died, or whatever? Why am I? And it's that not that. And once we realize we should be part of these families, these villages, um, we can give ourselves a bit more grace that actually this is harder because they were the head of my tribe or my
mm,
family or
yeah.
my main caregiver or so on and so forth. And I think there's a lot about not a jail get out of jail free card, but grace, giving ourselves grace
Mm,
to experience the grief, experience the loss, experience the. And for me, the breakdown, I think I didn't have mine was I had a breakdown as well. And my
mm,
breakdown, I think I was very hard on myself that I was feeling. And now I would look back on
mm.
it and go, do you know what? I wish I'd just laid in bed and enjoyed the fact that I was lying in bed and sleeping, and got over myself a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
Um, I love that you're
But
coaching.
guilt is a
What would be your, I know the guilt's awful. Guilt's awful
mm,
because you should be a busy person, because you should be achieving and because you have the potential.
mm.
Um, what would be your favorite modality to use for yourself?
Um, I have a few really. Um, I found that journaling's really good, or just writing down and pouring out like that. Do a sort of a meditation thing because I think you can sit in your own thoughts. But the EFT is becoming very much prominent. Um, that that can have, so I think really it's that real rounded combination. And I was speaking to somebody the other day and I was like, sometimes it's the round one modality can only tap so like can get so far when you can use a lot, which I can now, and can give that to that experience to other people. We can go that little bit more further.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's been the combination of it all, um, a really
I
good
think for
factor.
me that there's some you can use in an immediacy, like breath
Yeah.
work. So something happens, you can use your breath work immediately too, or tapping immediately, depending on the situation.
Mm.
There are some situations that you don't want to be standing. Now, I
No,
would
and it's just a
doesn't
small,
doesn't bother me,
yeah,
but I know there's some people that wouldn't be going, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe. So I think it depends on the situation as well. And there's some to me are maintenance. So for me, meditation, breath work, I do those before I get out of bed in the morning and last thing at night before I go to sleep, because those to me are absolute flatline maintenance. Those have to be done every single day. Um, so yeah, it depends to me. It depends on situations, but a bit like you, I love EFT time. Still love
yeah.
EFT.
And one of the simplest things, Val, I always say to people is the beauty of just getting fresh air and out in nature. That is
Yeah,
just the simplest tool,
yeah.
but
And yet
just
the
go
science is
and
all there
walk.
to back that
And
up
the
as well.
simple, yeah, the science is there, but just simply walk for 10 minutes in the fresh air and see how much, and we go, oh, that sounds real
Be better.
cheesy. No,
Yeah,
you will
no,
feel so much.
no,
Or if you can't
absolutely.
even walk, you know, open the windows to the room, go to the door and stand at it. Just bring in that fresh air, you know.
Plants.
And another little one I like as well is decluttering, you
See, I
know.
have a problem with that. I know I should, but I have a problem with it. But going back to your so during COVID and stuff, I had a couple of
Mm,
clients who lived in flats and things like that, and that was we were like, bring the outside in,
plants. Yeah,
have it somewhere, because even you're still getting the photosides from the plants, even if you've brought them inside. If you really can't if you really can't get outside, try and bring them in.
yeah.
Um, yeah, decluttering. Yeah, I'm not good at that. Really not. And I know Lisa and Joe go on about it all the time. They've a list of things, and it's always decluttering's always on there. And I'm like, no, that's where everything falls apart for me. Not
Well,
good.
sometimes it's just small things like, empty your bag, just something
Yeah.
that, because
I
as
know,
well,
and I've done that where we've gone through the sock drawer, and you have a half a dozen socks that are single socks because their partners have divorced them and gone and become Tupperware lids.
yeah,
Um,
they've all gone
but
off to emigrate somewhere.
God, do you know where did they go? Um,
Yeah.
but I did my desk over the winter period there, and I found a calendar from 2020. That's I am but anyway, hi ho. So to finish off the podcast, I ask another 3 wee questions. And the reason I ask the 3 questions is because if somebody asked me my favorite book, I couldn't tell you. It's normally what I'm reading right now, or the mood I'm in, that it would particularly be this book or whatever. So your
Yes,
favorite,
I thought that,
yeah, or your
but I have
favorite
one.
phrase, or what you would tell your younger self. And it's up to you whether you answer all 3 of them or just one of them.
Well, I do a bit like you where I read and it becomes my favorite one and I'm sort of mature off that. I do like the badass books, and habit books and things like that. But there's one that's almost becoming my Bible. And I
Oh,
thought this is it, and it's got bits in it. I've come back to it. Um, I've read more chapters. I'm going to go and read the front bit again because it's quite sort of hard. But I think the more I learn, the more I think that the book will give me more golden nuggets. And it's called A Happy Pocket Full of Money. Have
okay,
you
very
heard of
good.
it?
I
It's
have.
David Cameron Gikandi, is it? Yeah. Um, and the reason even is a bit at the back where it helps you do some sort of, what do they call it? Study work that you could then pick out in small groups, which would be absolutely fantastic if I got to do something like that. But from a personal level, it's really helps. And there's a phrase on here, and I put it onto my vision board, which is are you living a life by design, or are you living a life by default?
Um, very good.
And that, or it might be a living by default or living by design. But either way, it's saying, are you just falling into anything and you don't know where you're going? Or are you purposely thinking about what you're doing to take those steps?
Yeah.
And I think I've spent a lot of time just defaulting. Um,
And your brain loves programs. Your brain loves if we learn how to clean our teeth and we don't have to think about which muscles we're using, or we learn how to tie our shoelaces, eat, walk, whatever, whatever, whatever. If we can crunch that down into a program and run the program, and that's part of the default, is what program are you running and is it serving you? If it's
yeah,
no longer serving you, how are you going to upgrade it? How are you going to change it? How are you going to break it? How are you going to get rid of it? Very good.
yeah,
That's not
yeah.
okay. And so is that your favorite phrase?
That's my favorite phrase. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I sort
And
of switch back into, am I designing this or am I just defaulting along and going along with it? And it can mean so many things, can't it? Because are you going along with your design or somebody else's?
else's. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Very good. And what would you tell your younger self?
found this one really difficult. Um, the
Don't
classic
have to
one would,
do.
well, the classic one is that it'll all work out okay and you'll be absolutely fine. Um, but I think that seems a bit shallow now. That sounds really awful to say it's shallow, but I think I could tell myself that. But I think that there's a bit of work to do um on that. But it is about being safe.
Yeah. Yes, very much so. That is all. That is all our younger selves ever, our inner child. That to be able to do anything in life, first of all, we have to feel safe.
Yeah.
And I know the triangle, Maslow's triangle of
Maslow's triangle.
hierarchy.
Yeah. All the
I think his,
chakras.
I think his is the second. I think safety is the second one, and it's food and shelter and stuff's the bottom one. And I'm like,
Yeah.
but if you can't digest properly because you don't feel safe. So for me, I think I would swap them around, and I would have safety
Yeah.
as the very as
It's
the base
very,
one.
yeah.
And I
And
know
it's
it's
funny
kind of
because,
hand in hand. You're not going to feel safe if you don't have somewhere to live. You're not going to feel safe if you don't have food, but you can't digest the food if you don't feel safe. So it's maybe.
yeah, it's very, but it's funny because everybody knows Maslow's hierarchy, or most people do, because they've come across it in some form or other. And as soon as I started to know and learn about chakras and divulge into that area, I was like, who's nicked this then? Maslow, you've just nicked this off these ancient chakra rules. You've just nicked basically the, our root chakra, our safety, our feeling that we're secure and we're grounded is just the bottom of your triangle.
Yeah.
And we go up in those areas. And I was like, oh, and that was the first thing I thought. I went, it's just Maslow's hierarchy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it is.
So yeah,
So Sally, thank you very much indeed.
thank you.
We'll put links to your websites or whatever in the
Yeah,
descriptors if there's stuff you want to promote through that. Thank you very much for your
thank
time,
you.
and I hope you stay well, and I hope your business goes from strength to strength and you help as many people as you can.
Thank you. Thank you for having
Thank you
me.
so much.